if I can go back to the deadlift comment, um, so so big gains from big exercises is what I'm hearing. If I sort of zoom out and think about the take home for people that might be listening, uh, would that be right? I mean, are you seeing a similar sort of effect with something equivalent like a squat or a big muscle movement such as bent over row, for example?
Yeah, I think we looked at a whole bunch of those major compound movements, and we see this increase in power, more like a greater relative increase in power than in strength by people that just. And this is not a power program. This is not even a program. This is just what they did. If they deadlifted or they bench pressed, on a fairly regular basis, I think it was once a week with a high level of consistency, we see these increases in power. The reason I like deadlift, particularly in the active aging community, it's such a functional movement, right? It's picking up your shopping,
Picking stuff up,
out of the car. It's lifting and carrying. I think Peter Attia, big longevity kind of things, talks about farmers walks. Well, that's kind of a similar kind of pattern. That ability to like move your mass and an additional mass out of that somewhat seated position to standing upright, just a super functional movement. And so that's one that I really like, is because it's a lot more practically relevant, I believe, into the real world. And we don't get to measure that in the research science very often. Most of the epidemiological or other research, it's hand grip strength, right, for strength measures. We don't generally, on large scale, be able to measure these highly functional movements. And so I like it from that side because it gives a perspective there. On the flip side, I will say just another tidbit of the data that didn't make it in. We see, and I think all of the epidemiological research says the same, that you kind of increase in strength in your 20s and you probably max out in your 30s, hold it on to your 40s, and then starts declining relatively quickly to about 70 and then drops like a stone. We see the same general pattern in the average tonal user, like just looking at them as a mass cohort of people. What we actually see is if we plot body weight against some of those, we actually see strength relative per body pound of body weight or per kilo of body weight actually maxes in 20 and then is on a slow decline all the time. That's not tonal users and using it. This is not the same person that's 20 that we're measuring at 30. We will eventually, and hopefully we reverse that. But looking at our 20-year-olds versus our 30-year-olds versus our 40-year-olds, because they get stronger between 20 and 30, but they put on more mass, they put on more weight, and they put on more weight continually. And so we have this kind of combination of, yes, you get a little weaker and you get a little heavier. So something like a deadlift becomes infinitely harder. So we show that we can reverse it, but we just look at the population as a snapshot of a couple of 100,000 Americans. And I would imagine it's fairly applicable across the world. Like, we get weaker pretty quickly, and it's significantly more than just the decrease in strength if you think about it per body weight.
And that's super interesting. And one of the key headlines I saw, despite all the benefits of lower body exercise, lifters are still skipping leg day. Now, you'll be pleased to know, Troy, I have got proper soreness because leg day was yesterday.
Nice.
But
I'm going to peak in another 24 hours. The DOMs will kick in severe.
You know what? Because I went heavy last week, and I think it wasn't. It's not. I lifted a little bit more yesterday, but I think I'm not going to be quite as sore because I was really limping about. And I've returned. I used to sprint, as you might know, but I returned to strength training after sort of good long periods of time of endurance based work, and I'm mixing the two now. But it was great to see that because it's quite confronting. What are your insights as to why people are skipping leg day?
Yeah, it's undeniable in the data. So I think I don't have the report in front of me, so I'm pulling from memory. But I think when people get to choose their own free lifting program, they're only including a leg exercise once every 4 workouts or something, 25%, something around that. And so the data is, this is hundreds of thousands of people. It's undeniable. Why? We didn't measure that per se, but I certainly have my hypotheses from, being in our community, seeing the strength training kind of things. There is a mismatch between what people say is important to them and then what they are then choosing to do. So people overwhelmingly, one of the highest sort of metrics for us is healthy, long living. That's what our members want to do. But when they choose to free program, I think it's fairly consistent. Most people would agree that, like, including leg exercises is probably more important for, as we talked about, activities of daily living, out the stairs, gait speed, those types of functions. But we still go back to curls and bench press as a default, particularly guys, less females, and less the truly older members than the younger members. And so why does that mismatch exist? I think it comes back to perception of effort. They're hard.
Okay. Yeah.
I think quite simply, I think people
Yeah.
know it's important.